Hello there, I'm Aishwarya Kapoor. Welcome to year 2019's first edition of World Panorama. All the biggest international news stories that made headlines in the first week of the new year coming up in the next 30 minutes. First up, the headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is prepared for partial shutdown of the U.S. government to last years. Fails to reach an agreement with the Democrats over Mexico border wall funding. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's alliance wins Bangladesh's election with a thumping majority. Hasina's third straight term despite vote-rigging claims. New cabinet to be sworn in on 7th of January. And Chinese president vows to bring Taiwan under Beijing's control through all necessary measures, says the reunification with China inevitable. Taiwan remains defiant, says will never accept one country, two systems. It is a new year, but for the U.S. government, problems of the last year are continuing well into 2019. U.S. lawmakers in the White House are no closer to breaking an impasse over the funding of the Mexico border barrier, despite the government shutdown entering its third week. The Democrat-controlled U.S. House of Representatives voted to end a partial government shutdown, but the move looks certain to be vetoed by President Donald Trump, who insists that he will reject any measure that does not provide funding for his proposed U.S. Mexico border wall. Trump says he's prepared for the shutdown to even last years. Scenes of joy and excitement on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives as Democrats assumed power, taking control from fellow Republicans, who, however, remain in charge of the Senate. The new U.S. Senate was also sworn in.
True faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely.
However, as soon as the new Congress convened, Democrats wasted no time flexing their new power in the House of Representatives, approving a legislation to end a partial government shutdown while ignoring President Donald Trump's demand for a $5 billion for a border wall. As a result, the move looks certain to be vetoed by the president. The Republican-run Senate has said that it may not even vote on the legislation.
We just got to look at the right way of securing the border. I want to work with you. We want to work with you. But the wall is a 14th century solution. We can do better than that.
As the bill does not include funding for the Mexican border wall, the cause of the shutdown, the impasse will continue. Republicans still control the Senate and say they will not pass the funding bill without Trump's approval.
Madam Speaker, the bills that House Democrats have chosen to consider today are not in keeping with the months of good faith negotiations to resolve the differences between the House, the Senate, and the White House. More importantly, they fail to truly address the crisis on our southern border and the very real threat it poses to the safety and security of our homeland.
The partial U.S. government shutdown began when Congress and Trump failed to reach an agreement over a budget bill in December. Trump's Republicans had passed the budget bill, including a $5 billion funding for the wall in December, when they still had a majority in the House. But they could not get the necessary 60 votes in the 100-seat Senate. The House majority has passed to the Democrats following the November midterm elections, but Trump remains adamant on funding for the wall.
You can call it a barrier, you can call it whatever you want, but essentially we need protection in our country. We're going to make it good. The people of our country want it. I have never had so much support as I have in the last week over my stance for border security, for border control, and for, frankly, the wall or the barrier.
Meanwhile, shutdown continues while many government functions, including the military, postal service, are still operating. A quarter of the government lacks funding. This means about 8 lakh federal workers across the country are affected, either required to stay home without pay or forced to work without pay. For the first time in US history, a government shutdown, the fourth longest on record already, has stretched from one Congress into the next. Worse, at the moment, there is no end in sight for the shutdown. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And to discuss, we have with us Mr. Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, joining us in the studio right now. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us here on Rajya Sabha Television.
Thank you.
Sir, the US partial government shutdown has now entered its third week, and more than 8 lakh federal employees are affected. They are either working, not working at all, they have to work without pay, they have to stay indoors. How do you look at the situation? Do you think Donald Trump really has been not considerate towards these workers who are affected?
But of course, the affected workers are hugely disenchanted and are in fact angry. As you said in the introduction, there are 800,000 federal workers who have been sent on leave without pay, or who are required to come and work without getting paid. So many of them say that they live from paycheck to paycheck,
yes,
and are not able to meet two ends meet. They also say that there are many essential payments that they have to make, such as mortgage payments, and they would forfeit their homes in case mortgage payments are not made. So there is a lot of anger among them, particularly because they say that congressmen, the president and the president's staff will continue to draw their salaries.
Yes.
There are many persons who are classified as the providers of essential services, such as TSA agents, who are reporting sick and not coming for work because, again, they don't want to work without pay. So there is a great deal of resentment. And as you mentioned in the introductory part, both sides seem to be digging in, the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yes.
And President Trump has said that this shutdown, which is now entering its third week, he wouldn't mind extending it for months and years if he doesn't get his wall.
So that is what is the question is. How long can this continue? Do you think there is any solution in sight?
Well, a solution can only be found if both sides agree to a compromise.
Yes.
Of course, pressure is building both on the Democrats and the Republicans to work out a compromise because people are greatly disenchanted. There has been a disruption of essential services and people are very unhappy about it. So there is some indication that attempts are being made to work out a compromise. The two top Democratic leaders, Nancy Pelosi, who's the president, the chairman of the House of, the Speaker of the House of Representatives,
yes,
and Senator Chuck Schumer, who's the Senate Minority Leader, the leader of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
They met President Trump a few hours ago, but the meeting was very combative. However, there are certain things which I must point out. When President Trump spoke later to reporters, he said that he's asking for a wall or a barrier. He said it doesn't have to be a concrete wall. Even a fence would do. Now, there is some possibility of a compromise being worked out because what he was initially asking was $5.6 billion.
Yes.
But certainly a fence will not require that. In fact, he said a fence would be better because you can see what's happening across on the other side. So the Democrats also, when they had passed this legislation to authorize the ending of the shutdown, they had included $1.3 billion towards border security. The Republicans have been asking them to increase this amount. So if there is some give and take, if President Trump comes down on his requirement and settles for a fence which would cost less, and if the Democrats are prepared to fund a little more towards border security, I think some compromise can be worked out. Frankly, while President Trump has said that he doesn't mind the shutdown continuing for months or even years, nobody wants that happening because their popularity would be eroded. The public, the voters will hold both sides accountable. And I think neither the Republicans nor the Democrats would want that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Both would not want that sort of thing to happen. But Donald Trump has even said that he's ready to declare even an emergency to build the wall without Congress. Do you think he can do that? And if he does, can somebody move courts for that?
Well, theoretically, under US laws, the president can declare an emergency and authorize expenditure for building a wall, taking the money out of the defense budget. Money which has been apportioned for other purposes relating to defense, he could divert. In practical terms, I don't see that as happening because, as you said, there would be a spate of lawsuits to prevent this from happening. The Democrats are not going to allow that. In all likelihood, there would be attempts made towards some kind of a compromise. At the moment, things are very far away from such a compromise. But considering the fact that the mood of the voters is increasingly becoming more and more angry, that anger is going to be taken out against the elected representatives. So surely both the Republicans and the Democrats would want some kind of a solution to be worked out. And as I said, when President Trump said he didn't ask for a concrete wall, he said just I asked for a wall or a barrier, which is coming down in terms of his initial position. And I think if he comes down and the Democrats go up a few notches, the Americans would be released from this situation where they are between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. How is this entire shutdown affecting Donald Trump's popularity, not only in terms of his popularity in the electorate, but also within the party? So far, Republicans have shown a sort of united front.
Well, you know, in his meeting with Senator Chuck Schumer and Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, the first 15 minutes was spent by Donald Trump lecturing to them and speaking to them in very strong terms, using expletives, I'm told, about this whole impeachment business. There are lots of analysts who feel that President Trump has raised the ante on this entire border wall issue to work out some sort of an arrangement so that this whole impeachment process and the Mueller investigation could be dropped. The Democrats are not going to be willing to do that. I think they want to keep the pressure on President Trump. But there is a growing feeling in the United States amongst analysts and in the media that President Trump is using this entire border wall issue as an excuse to kill the Mueller investigation, to get it out of the way, because he's having a very hard time in terms of this entire impeachment issue.
Absolutely.
So his popularity surely is coming down, particularly amongst people who are the working class and who are supporters of the Democratic Party. They say that his popularity amongst his voter base remains very strong. But if they feel the inconvenience of things, then I'm sure that they would be affected. You know, there are minor issues which may not appear very important to us, but they irk the common man. For instance, in terms of the shutdown, national parks are open, but the employees there have been withdrawn because they are federal employees. Now, in the last few days, there have been 3 deaths in national parks, and there is a lot of anger among people about this whole matter. So certainly the popularity of President Trump would be affected, but as I see it, and as many people see it, he is trying to use this wall issue to somehow get rid of this impeachment process.
All right. So, but the shutdown that began on 22nd of December, of course, is the 19th to occur since the mid-70s. And some, of course, have been really brief. You have to wait and watch how long this one lasts.
The longest till now, Aishwarya, was 21 days. And by the look of things, this one might become longer than that.
All right. We have to wait and watch whether that happens or not. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us and sharing your perspective on that entire story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On to the other big story this week. Sheikh Hasina will be sworn in as Bangladeshi Prime Minister for the third time. Besides Hasina, other cabinet ministers will also take oath on 7th of January at the official residence and office of a Bangladeshi president. Now, this came after President Hamid extended an invite to Hasina to form the government after her party Awami League appeared as the single largest party, securing 288 of the total 300 seats. However, the opposition BNP party has rejected the vote as rigged. The party has been hobbled in this election by the absence of its chairperson Khalida Zia, who has been in jail since February on corruption charges. Tight security seen around Bangladeshi capital Dhaka on Sunday as voting went into full swing in the country's 11th general election. The tension, however, was palatable due to violence-plagued campaigning that reportedly killed 17 people. As a result, the country of 165 million people saw sparse turnout at several polling booths. On Monday morning, the country's election commission declared that the ruling coalition led by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had won the vote in a landslide, paving the way for her Awami League party to stay in power and ensuring her a third term as head of government. Hasina's party and its allies secured 288 out of 300 contested seats. Local residents saying that they were looking forward to the country further developing under Hasina's leadership.
I am very happy because Bangladesh Awami League and Sheikh Hasina is coming back into power again. I hope Bangladesh will develop more in future.
But the result has been clouded by not only pre-election violence and allegations of a crackdown on the opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party or the BNP, as well as widespread reports of vote rigging and intimidation on the election day. The BNP, which won only 7 seats, has called the election farcical and demanded a do-over. The party boycotted the last election in 2014 and its leader Khalida Zia is currently serving a 17-year prison sentence for corruption, which she says is politically motivated. In her absence, the opposition coalition is being led by former Hasina ally Kamal Hussain.
That the whole election was in a way manipulated, in a way which is unprecedented. You know, we've seen bad elections in the past, but none really which has showed the kind of manipulation that went on here, that, you know, people were not allowed to go.
However, Hasina has rejected all allegation of impropriety. The Election Commission also ruled out re-election. Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated his Bangladeshi counterpart Sheikh Hasina on her resounding victory, India hoping that Hasina's re-election will further consolidate bilateral ties. The total trade between the two countries has grown by more than 17% from the year 2012 to 2017.
And we've seen in recent years cooperation on a number of extremely important areas, arresting terrorists who have sought refuge in Bangladesh and handing them over to us, important progress on issues such as the connectivity by road and rail, improved trade. So my impression is that as far as India-Bangladesh relations is concerned, they will certainly be in good hands.
In the past 20 years in Bangladesh, power has shifted back and forth between Hasina's Awami League and the BNP. Under Hasina, the country has lifted itself out of poverty and stabilized politically and economically with a 6% rate of growth. But the government has also been accused of oppression by rights groups. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged the people of Taiwan to accept that it must and will be reunited with China. In a speech marking 40 years since the start of improving ties, he reiterated Beijing's call for peaceful unification on a one country, two systems basis. However, he also warned that China reserved the right to use force. However, Taiwan's president says that the island would never accept reunification with China under the terms offered by Beijing. At the start of the new year, China sending hard-hitting message, vows to bring Taiwan under its control through all necessary measures, not ruling out the threat of military action to reclaim it. The message was loud and clear as President Xi Jinping delivered a speech this Wednesday at a gathering to commemorate the 40th anniversary of issuing message to compatriots in Taiwan. That message, issued on 1st of January 1979 by China's top legislature, had formulated major policies to realize peaceful reunification of China. On Wednesday, the Chinese president said the smaller island must and will be reunited with China.
Peaceful reunification is in the best interest of the compatriots across the strait and the Chinese nation. But we make no promise to renounce the use of force. We reserve the option for all the necessary means.
China still sees democratic Taiwan as part of its territory to be reunified, despite the two sides being ruled separately since the end of a civil war in 1949. Xi's comments provoked a swift rebuke from Taiwan, where President ING-WEN said Taiwan's people would never willingly give up the kind of democratic freedoms unseen on the mainland.
Taiwan will never accept one country, two systems. The majority of the Taiwanese public also resolutely oppose one country, two systems. This is the Taiwan consensus.
Taiwan considers itself a sovereign state with its own currency, political and judicial systems, but has never declared formal independence from the mainland. But China has sought to influence Taiwan's political landscape for some time and has its own preferences for who leads the smaller island nation. Relations have been strained since the 2016 election of President Tsai, who has refused to acknowledge Beijing's stance that the island is part of one China. She also accused Beijing of provocations that strained people's emotional connection to the mainland, such as buying off Taiwan's few diplomatic allies and increased military drills near the island. In recent years, Beijing has become increasingly assertive over its claims and what it says is a key question of national sovereignty, with analysts fearing that the issue of Taiwan could spark a major conflict in Asia. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And here is a look at some more international news stories in Global Buzz. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that he had received a great letter from Kim Jong-un. This came after the North Korean leader warned Pyongyang may change its approach to nuclear talks if Washington persists with sanctions. Trump told a cabinet meeting that he got a letter from Kim Jong-un reiterating that he still expected to hold a second summit with North Korean leader after the pair signed a pledge on denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in Singapore last June. Preliminary results from Democratic Republic of Congo's presidential election may be delayed past Sunday because of the low number of voting tally sheets received so far. The country's Electoral Commission said that the vote counting centers had received just 20% of the tally sheets. Many Congolese were kept away from voting in the 30th of December presidential election because the polling station opened late, closed early, and voting machines sometimes did not work. The vote, which has been repeatedly delayed since 2016, is meant to choose a successor to incumbent Joseph Kabila, who is due to step down this month after 18 years in power. Jair Bolsonaro was sworn in as Brazil's president on Tuesday, taking the reins of the nation with promises to liberalize Brazil's economy, rid the country of socialism, and introduce education reforms. A seven-term congressman who spent decades on the fringes of Brazilian politics, Bolsonaro was swept to power in October by voters' outrage with the traditional political parties, making him Brazil's first right-wing president since the dictatorship. That's all in this edition of World Panorama, but we leave you with the pictures of the far side of the moon that China's probe Chang'e 4 took. The probe, comprising a lander and a rover, landed at the pre-selected landing area of the moon, making China the first country to land a probe on the far side of the moon. The far side of the moon is the one that is never seen from Earth, and it has some key differences to the near side. The mission would provide insights into the internal structure and the history of the moon. So take a look at these fascinating pictures as we take your leave. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.